Welcome to the FF Face-Off, where fantasy football is debated.
What's going on, guys? Pete Nova here with Face Off Sports Network, coming at you live today with a training camp news video. Going to break down all the latest training camp news when it comes to starting slots, roster, depth charts, all that good stuff. We're going to kind of try to sift through some of the weeds here on, some maybe hype that we're not buying into, as well as maybe some players that are getting steamed up that should be on your radar. So appreciate you guys tuning in for this early morning stream. I really enjoy doing these early in the morning, just kind of breaking down what's going on and getting some live information because these teams practice early on in the mornings, especially on the East Coast. And so we're getting live information, as we speak. So pretty fun show here. Excited to be here in the morning with you guys. Appreciate you guys making your morning routine here with me here at Face Off Sports Network. I'm going to go ahead and as I've done in the past, I'm going to drop in our Patreon/Discord. If you want to get all our rankings, chat with the guys, the analysts on the team, and just be a part of our community. We do have a free version in there, as well as 2 tiered versions that provide more access and more accessibility to us, as well as just more in-depth rankings, trade analysis, start-sit analysis, all that good stuff. We have you covered over there. But if you want to just hang out for free and talk to us too, there is that option as well. So drop that in there. So that's available to you guys if you want to go ahead and get in there. But let's kind of jump into the first news of the show. It's Kyren Williams, right? Kyren Williams finally gets a new deal, and it was speculated a ton this offseason with Jarquez Hunter, getting signed there in Los Angeles. We had the Blake Corum talk last year. Jarquez Hunter, 4th-round pick. I think Jarquez Hunter's still going to be involved in the offense. I think the contract extension, which was 23 million guaranteed over 3 years, that's really the biggest thing for me. I don't care about the total value of the contract. I care more about the guarantees, especially at the running back position. That's most important, right? Because it's really about when can the team move off the player and all those guarantees, right? A lot of people I've seen are comparing it to Ramondre Stevenson, who gets a 4-year contract extension last year, but he gets only 16 million guaranteed. So the team, if they wanted to move on from him, right, they could spread it out, I believe, over, the 4 years, right, in that contract. So it's a little bit different than Kyren, who gets, 10 million more guaranteed and 1 less year on his deal. It's going to be harder to move on from Kyren. And so I would expect the Rams to keep him around as their bell cow for this year and likely next year. I think if you are a team in dynasty that is, getting ready to maybe hit the rebuild, is a good opportunity to sell Kyren. I wouldn't sell him just yet unless you're really, really getting an inflated offer because people are buying because of the contract extension. But once you kind of get into the season, and Kyren starts to perform, which I expect him to do so, that will also open up a buy window. There's always the added risk of guys getting injured, and at the running back position, we see it happen consistently where, guys unfortunately go down with injury and, their value really plummets. So, do with that information what you will. But overall, it's a big win for Kyren Williams dynasty owners. It's a big win for guys that have been drafting him in best ball. And let's talk about Kyren Williams, right? The last few seasons, last year, RB7 on the year. He was 10th in points per game. A year before that, 21.3 points per game. Good enough for RB2 on the season. The biggest thing here with Kyren Williams is is honestly the explosive rating, right? 89.3 explosive rating gets him ranked number 35 per player profiler. And the explosive rating is pretty much a comprehensive rating on a player's explosiveness, which factors in their per play efficiency and total volume of explosives created. And then it's pretty much on a scale of 100, which is league average at the position, and blends passing, rushing, receiving, according to each player's usage. Pass plays over 20 yards or rush plays over 10 yards are considered explosive here in their explosive rating. But that's the biggest knock on Kyren Williams, right? And a lot of people have concerns about the explosiveness, and Jarquez Hunter provides a little bit of a different wrinkle there. I do think Jarquez Hunter is going to be involved. I also think getting the handcuff correct in this room is important, right? Because this is a bell cow role. So it offers premium upside if Kyren Williams does miss some time. And we have seen Kyren Williams miss time in the past, right? Due to injury, right? Last year, he only missed one game. In 2023, he missed 5 games. And in 2022, his rookie season, he played in just 9 games. Now, that was also a little bit different, right? He was a rookie at the time. He wasn't well established in this offense. But it's big news for Kyren Williams. It's big news for fantasy owners if you drafted him already. I mean, some people are already drafting in early August. But let's look a little bit more into Kyren Williams. I have Kyren Williams currently ranked as my running back 11, just ahead of Amarion Hampton and Jonathan Taylor, just behind Josh Jacobs. And he's in my 4th tier. So I think that's a pretty fair spot for Kyren Williams. They bring in Davante Adams, who I think is going to be a big weapon in the red zone. Kyren Williams is number 1 in red zone touches last year. I think this offense is going to, feature Davante Adams a lot more. And keep in mind, Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp, who are red zone weapons, were also missing a lot of time last year, which I think in total really inflated Kyren's total touchdowns, which he had 16 last year. Not necessarily a way to, I'm not trying to necessarily knock Kyren Williams in that regard, but I think touchdown regression is possible for sure. But again, 2023, he only played in 12 games and he had 15 total touchdowns, right? And that was, a season where I believe Cooper Kupp was kind of coming back from the injuries. And then 2024, Cooper Kupp got injured again. And then, in 2024, Kyren has 16, right? If Adams can stay healthy, if Puka can stay healthy, I think we do see some regression in the total touchdowns for Kyren. But I think running back 11 is pretty fair for him. Taking a look at just the ADP so far and kind of where Kyren Williams is going as drafts are starting to get going this year. Kyren Williams right now is actually RB 11 on Fantasy Pros. So I'm pretty much in line with consensus. And he's going at pick 24. So you're getting Kyren at the 2-3 turn. I think that's fair. And honestly, these are ADPs with the expectation or with the understanding that Kyren didn't have that extension. So there is a possibility Kyren goes up a little bit, maybe ahead of Jonathan Taylor, Josh Jacobs, or Bucky. I think that's very well possible. But a lot can happen from now until then. So we will see. I want to go ahead and move on to our next news, and it's going to be the news out a same team here. And it's Matthew Stafford, right? Matthew Stafford. This is a very, very interesting thing to monitor at the moment, and it affects the pass catchers, right? You have Matthew Stafford, who's got the back injury right now, and we get the report this morning from Ian Rappaport that Matthew Stafford is dealing with an aggravated disc and has received an epidural, and to help him heal with it. And Los Angeles called him week to week and are being cautious, but the plans are for him to, be ready week 1. We consistently hear to be ready for week 1. But a lot of teams are going to say that, right? And look, at the end of the day, Matthew Stafford knows this offense like the back of his hand. So he's super comfortable. And so he doesn't necessarily need the reps. Davante Adams, is a seasoned veteran. I'm not concerned about him and Stafford not being on the same page, so to speak. Those guys are seasoned veterans that, should be able to click very quickly when Stafford comes back. But back pain is pretty tricky, right? And an epidural is essentially just like a cortisone shot. And so, it's temporary at this point, and I mean, anybody that deals with back pain knows it's not fun, and it doesn't just go away, and especially for a 37-year-old quarterback who plays a sport where he gets pounded a ton. It's not fun, and I don't expect it to just go away. It's going to be something that he's probably going to have to manage all season. But when you talk about the pass catchers in this room and how it affects them, Puka Nacua right now, wide receiver 5 off the board and number 9 off the board. I'm skeptical on that cost for Puka Nacua. I prefer probably Malik Neighbors and Nico Collins over him. And taking a look at my rankings, I have Puka Nacua behind Malik Neighbors at 5, and I have Nico Collins at 6. I haven't adjusted my rankings just yet. I don't want to fret too much because at the end of the day, most people are not drafting in for another 2 to 3 weeks. And I would advise you, if you can hold off, do so because, it's important to try to wait as long as possible because a lot of things can happen during training camp. But with Davante Adams, right, his cost is much more favorable at the moment. And Davante Adams is wide receiver 16, and he goes off the board at 37. Currently, I have Davante Adams as wide receiver 15, and he's the last wide receiver in tier 3 for me. So I'm a little bit above consensus, but not a ton. I really hope that the Stafford situation opens up a buy window or just a discount. I'm sorry, for Davante Adams. When you look at Davante Adams, I know people are concerned about the Jimmy Garoppolo, stuff with Adams, and can they be effective together? But let's keep in mind that Jimmy G peppered Davante Adams in the first 3 weeks when he was healthy with Las Vegas. Davante Adams had 9 targets, 8 targets, and 20 targets in the first 3 weeks of the season. He had 12.6 fantasy points, 20.4 fantasy points, and 42.2 fantasy points. Now, then Jimmy G ended up missing some time that year, and then when he came back, he just really wasn't the same. I don't think Jimmy G was healthy. And then obviously we know what kind of happened with the rest that season. But I think Davante Adams with Jimmy G is not overly concerning. We've seen Sean McVay get the most out of quarterbacks. Heck, we saw Baker Mayfield come off the street on a short week and be effective in this offense. So I'm confident in Davante Adams. I don't mind his price at all, even with this news. I would say I'm a little hesitant on Puka and his current cost, especially with this news. I know I'm sitting here and saying, well, Davante Adams, not as concerning because of the quarterback situation. You might sit here and say, well, why is Puka not as concerning? At the end of the day, this is an offense that's going to now have Davante eating into that workload. I have both guys in my top 15, but Davante's cost is much less detrimental to your team if he doesn't necessarily boom at that cost. And we've seen Davante Adams be effective with bad quarterbacks, right? I mean, for a lot of what people have to say about Rodgers last year, a lot of people think Rodgers is quote unquote cooked. Davante Adams had 17.2 fantasy points per game last year, ranking number 9 in the NFL. And then you look at in 2023 with guys like Aiden O'Connell, and Gardner Minshew. Like, I mean, it's just, I don't know. I just think we've seen Adams be effective with even bad quarterback play. And so I'm not overly concerned for Adams, especially at his price point. Puka Nacua is a little more worrisome for me because he's being drafted so high. And there are guys around him that maybe offer a much more not safe, because Puka is going to get peppered with targets too, but just overall, I just think the price point for Puka just might be a little bit too expensive. And so I think there's room for caution, and there's definitely some cause for concern there. So taking a look, and let me take a break here for a second. taking a look at some recent news, and some of these I'm not going to spend too much time on, but just kind of want to throw some of it out there. Tory Horton is running with the first team offense. Super encouraging for the Seattle Seahawks wide receiver that they drafted this year in the 5th round. Tory Horton, a lot of people, a lot of sharp guys, especially that do a lot of college scouting, were very, very high on Tory Horton coming out, right? And Tory Horton only played 5 games last year in 2024 for Colorado State, suffering an injury. But in 2023, this is a guy who had 96 receptions for 1,136 yards in 2023 and 8 total touchdowns at Colorado State. And the year before that, he had another 1,000 yards in 2022, which was a sophomore breakout for Tory Horton. So this is very encouraging, especially if you're a dynasty manager. Tory Horton, right, running with the ones and being next to Cooper Kupp, who has had issues staying healthy. Cooper Kupp is not a spring chicken at all, and so I think it's very, very positive for Tory Horton. And if you're a dynasty owner, this is really, really what you want to see, and hopefully, you're not really expecting, or I'm not really expecting a ton from Tory Horton year one. But you know what? I mean, Cooper Kupp getting up there in age, if he can gel into this offense, Cooper Kupp, I'm trying to look at what Kupp's contract situation looks like. I know that they obviously brought him in from the Rams. It's a 3-year, $45 million deal, includes $26.5 million guaranteed. So Kupp is likely there for it's pretty much a 2-year deal. He's pretty much full 17.5 fully guaranteed at signing. And then a $9 million becomes guaranteed on the 5th day of the 2025 Super Bowl. So an interesting wrinkle there. It seems they have a possibility to get out of $9 million of that $26.5 million for Cooper Kupp. But overall, Kupp is likely going to be there next year as well, unless, there's serious decline for Kupp. And I think Kupp's actually a pretty interesting value, just overall in drafts. If we take a look at Cooper Kupp, and I know we started with Horton, but we're going to move around a lot today. But Cooper Kupp, wide receiver 39 and 84th off the board. Not a terrible price tag for Cooper Kupp. He's not going, inside the first half of the of the top 100 picks. He's going pretty far in the second half, of the top 100. And he goes around guys like Deebo Samuel, Stephon Diggs, Jacoby Myers, Khalil Shakir, Jawan Jennings. I prefer Deebo at this point in time. I prefer Rome Odunze. He goes one spot ahead of him. But in terms of Cooper Kupp, I have him as my wide receiver 45, one spot behind Deebo. And I did say he is wide receiver 39. So I'm a little bit beyond consensus on Kupp, but I don't have any strong opinions on a lot of the guys that are a little bit ahead of him in my rankings, at least, which would be guys like, Stephon Diggs, Jaden Reed, Khalil Shakir, Michael Pittman, Matthew Golden, Igbuka. I think a lot of those guys are good shots to take, and I'm okay with it. I actually kind of like the receivers in that range in a lot of drafts, but Cooper Kupp's in my tier 7, and like I said, wide receiver 45. He joins an offense with Sam Darnold, new play caller in Seattle there too, which should be exciting. I guess the biggest thing that hinges on this offense is Sam Darnold going to see quote unquote ghosts, right? Is he going to flop, right? You get Clint Kubiak though, who, comes over, from the Saints, and he was also with Denver as well before that. And, Clint Kubiak's going to bring that zone read rushing offense. And it should be better, right? I think last year, we were pretty high, and myself included, on Grubb coming over from Washington in college. And I expect this to be a heavy pass offense. This year, I think they realized that the rushing offense was pretty bad, and it's a strength of this team. And I think they're going to run the football. They have two very capable backs. Hell, Damian Martinez is a really good third back as well. A lot of people, including myself, were pretty high on Damian Martinez. It seemed like there were some character concerns there, but overall, Seattle's offense is going to run with Sam Darnold, which isn't, is not an insane or earth-shattering thing to say. But I just think, the wide receivers in this offense, Cooper Kupp is priced pretty solid. JSN is the most expensive guy in this offense. And when you just take a look at JSN, he's going in the third round, wide receiver 14, pick 33 overall. So you're getting him at about a mid third round price tag, which is okay. I think that's a fine shot to take for a guy that I think has top 12 upside for sure. Moving on to some of the next news. Not going to spend too much time on this, but AD Mitchell appears to have really, really impressed in camp. Reportedly, quote unquote, cooking in camp is what a lot of the beat reporters have said. And it's encouraging for Mitchell, who, last year goes in the second round. I think, he kind of slid a little bit per a lot of people's projections of where he would go in the NFL draft last year. When I say AD Mitchell, Adonai Mitchell, I'm sure most people kind of got the hint on who I was referring to, but he gets picked 20th overall in the second round last year out of Texas and didn't really have a strong rookie season, right? It was pretty flat. 23 receptions, 312 yards. He played in a total of 17 games and only ran a total of 203 routes. So he was on the field for 11.9 routes per game. Route participation wise, 37.2%, ranked 105 in the NFL. And, but interestingly enough, target rate, when he was on the field running routes, he was targeted on 27.1% of his routes, ranked 16th in the NFL last year. But I think the truth about this is that this offense has Alec Pierce as well there, who I expect to be there in two wide receiver sets next to Michael Pittman Jr. And you're going to have a lot of Tyler Warren. I don't know. I was thinking Tyler Kraft for some reason. But yeah, Tyler Warren's going to be out there a lot as well. And as a guy that loves Josh Downs, I don't know if Josh Downs is going to be there on two wide receiver sets a ton. So it's just it becomes a crowded room a little bit for AD Mitchell. But, I think the encouraging thing for AD Mitchell is he doesn't need to play in the slot. And so, if you can project AD Mitchell to maybe continue to take steps forward in this offense, right? Maybe he takes a little bit of Alec Pierce's, maybe he takes a little bit of Alec Pierce's snaps away, but it really seemed like the connection with Alec Pierce is pretty strong. Now I want to take a look in college and take a look at AD Mitchell really quick, because I am curious to see, what Adonai Mitchell did in terms of where he lined up in terms of positional wise. So give me a second here, but I'm just curious because I did say he's somebody that doesn't need to play in the slot, but I don't want to actually. I want to take a second here to take a look and just verify snaps per position. Yeah, I mean, he played out wide in 731 snaps in 2023. In the slot, he played 150. Right, so this is a guy that if he takes a step forward, he was a second round pick. Right, could he beat out Alec Pierce for that role? I think probably more in that I think Pittman probably plays that X role, but I'm not entirely sure. I didn't really prep that to really speak on that too much. But yeah, I mean, he could definitely probably play on that X role, and Chev said, definitely a bona fide X. Yeah, and I appreciate the alley-oop there or the lob, because overall, I mean, this is a guy that they spent heavy draft capital on. And so AD Mitchell, it's pretty encouraging. You're practically going to get AD Mitchell for free. Now, I don't know how heavily I'm investing in pass catchers in this offense outside of guys like Downs and Warren. I have some shares of Pittman. I think Pittman's pretty undervalued. So, I mean, I'll probably have some shares there too. But outside of that, how consistent is AD Mitchell going to be? Now, we do know that Richardson struggled to throw in the intermediate, but he was able to throw the ball deep. And so that if AD is going to get snaps at the X position, could be encouraging, for him if he is in that Alec Pierce role, because Alec Pierce's role was pretty effective last year, right? He was pretty solid. It's just more of, can you count on him to, to start on a weekly basis. And I just don't think we're there yet with Alec Pierce for sure. But let's move on to some more news and notes. Let's see what I got here. Yeah, I mean, unofficial depth chart comes out for Travis Hunter and that Jaguars offense. And it's got Travis Hunter listed as a starting wide receiver and the backup cornerback right now. I'm not feeding too much into this. I think at the end of the day, they took him as a top 5 pick. I'm not surprised that he's high. I think people are going to look at the backup cornerback thing and be, use that as a way to kind of point to, hey, confirmation bias. And I think Hunter is going to be good. I think he can be a solid player for fantasy this year. I have him as my wide receiver 32. I think his ceiling is probably wide receiver 20 this year. I don't know. I did a whole report on, just snap shares and wide receivers last year and the routes that they ran. And pretty much wide receivers last year in the top 25, top 25 had to run 26 routes per game. All of them except one, which is Puka Nacua, ran 26 routes per game. So Travis Hunter, we need to hope that he gets to, a threshold around, probably, 24 to 26 routes per game. But I think he's kind of being drafted a little bit at his ceiling, possibly. But that ceiling opens up if, Brian Thomas Jr. misses any time, which, look, at the end of the day, we've seen him miss time, not miss time, so to speak, but we've seen him go down with injuries, training camp scares, right? So it's not out of the question for, BTJ to go down and open up a pathway for Travis Hunter to really be on the field for 100% of the snaps. So it'll be interesting to monitor that situation. It was actually kind of cool. So Devontae Adams came out yesterday, and I think he gave a really, really, really awesome answer about the Travis Hunter, talk. And I'm going to read the quote off here, but Devontae Adams, on him playing both sides, he said, "I don't even think it's possible to do, not at a high level. That's just a lot of mileage, man." And I'm kind of, whatever. I'm not even concerned so much if he can do it over the course of a game or a season. It's more like, how long is his career going to be if he's playing that many snaps? All you're doing is doubling your risk for injury, and I don't wish that on him at all. I hope that he can play an injury-free season and go ball out, but it's just the reality. The more you're on the field, it's already 100% injury risk guarantee sport. But once you get out there playing both sides, now you have to tackle. And you got Derrick Henry with that frame. You got to tackle him as well. So I think it's a really good point. And I think overall, I think we're going to see eventually them shift Travis Hunter to dominantly playing just one side of the ball, whether that's wide receiver, whether that's cornerback. We know, and we've seen comments even from Cohen, who said, he started off at wide receiver in camp because he's a more polished corner. And so they wanted to get him more reps at the wide receiver position, which makes a ton of sense, right? And Travis Hunter's a guy I'm rooting for, right? I know, a lot of times it might seem like I'm hating on him. I just prefer a guy like Ted McMillan in Dynasty and in redraft. But overall, I think Travis Hunter is a good Dynasty play. It's just a matter of where he goes long-term on which side of the ball. I don't expect him to be long-term playing both sides. Maybe he goes wide receiver full-time after like 2 years and they end up playing him in, key situations at corner. It can be a little bit dicey doing that, but he's an athlete. And so I think he'll be okay. But it's going to be interesting to see how things unravel with Travis Hunter. I'm excited to just watch him as a football player, right? It's really, really cool for football, right? Fantasy aside, it's going to be really, really fun to see Travis Hunter's career and how, he plays out there. But let's move on to some of the next news and notes here as I grab a sip. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to plug them into the chat. Really appreciate you guys tuning in today to the show. But if you want to just hang out and you're just kind of relaxing and maybe on your ride to work or at work currently, appreciate you tuning in. Next news and notes I want to talk about is it's the Houston Texans, their wide receiver room. Houston Texans came out with their unofficial depth chart, which all of these are unofficial, quote unquote. Christian Kirk in the slot, Jaden Higgins playing at the X, and Nico Collins playing on the other side. Jalen Noel backing up in the slot. I think this is probably pretty much what was expected. I don't think this is necessarily earth-shattering news, so to speak. When you look at these wide receivers, let's take a look at their ADPs right now. Nico Collins, of course, is the star in this room. Nico Collins, wide receiver 7, pick 14 off the board in PPR formats. Currently, Higgins is currently, I believe he's the next wide receiver. Actually, no, he's not. It would actually be Christian Kirk. Higgins was actually the next wide receiver in a lot of best ball formats. It's interestingly enough. Let me take a look here. Actually, you know what? I misspoke. Higgins is currently 141 off the board, wide receiver 53, and Christian Kirk is 60th off the board for wide receivers and pick 163. And then Jalen Noel is pretty much the lowest guy here. Jalen Noel is a nice deep league stash with Christian Kirk's injury history. He slots in really, really well there. I even think that there's a path for Noel to be able to play on the outside a little bit too. And Nico Collins has missed some time as well with injuries. So, and maybe, Jaden Higgins, who I love, absolutely love Jaden Higgins. Maybe Jaden Higgins doesn't get off to the strongest start, but it's been pretty encouraging for Jaden Higgins. And just overall, from what we've heard in camp, Christian Kirk has gotten steamed up a ton as well in camp. Practically reports coming out saying that he's almost been unguardable. And I really love to see that for Christian Kirk. He's a really, really talented player. Health is really the biggest concern for Kirk. And can he stay on the field, right? And if he can, I think he's going to absolutely blow by his ADP severely. We're talking about a guy who's going to be practically picked at almost one of your last picks in the draft, 163. If Christian Kirk is healthy, guys, he is going to be a top, 35 wide receiver, probably, like very much so. He's extremely talented. He's going to be playing in that Stephon Diggs slot role. And Stephon Diggs in that slot role was extremely impressive last year and started off really strong. Now, Stephon Diggs is overall a better player than Christian Kirk. But Stephon Diggs now with the ACL, I think he's going to be good, but it's remains to be seen. But I'm gonna take a look here, and I did drop this a couple months back, but Kirk is probably stepping into that same underneath in breaking route role that Stephon Diggs had in Houston, and Diggs averaged 15 points per game in that role. Kirk profiles identically to Stephon Diggs per player profiler, and that's their best comp, right? Not identically like a perfect comp, but pretty dang close. Christian Kirk is younger at this juncture, and when you take a look at the yards per route run last year, Stephon Diggs ran 1.84 yards per route run. Christian Kirk 1.71 yards per route run. Both were used similar and almost exclusively in the underneath and intermediate game. And so I think Christian Kirk could be a very solid value in drafts. And he's pretty much going almost undrafted. So I think that's good to hear, that Christian Kirk looks good, and just some news on just that wide receiver room and how that depth chart has shaken out so far. Some other things, Chase Brown, reports are that he's expected to see an expanded pass catching role. I don't think that comes as a surprise, so to speak. I don't know how much expanded we're talking about here. Is he splitting out wide? Is he going to get a different, receiver tree? I mean, because it's almost impossible to project him to get much more volume, so to speak. But when you look at Chase Brown, last year he was extremely effective and was a league winner. I mean, league winner gets thrown around a ton, and it's almost impossible to tell what even a league winner is anymore, because of how much people and analysts are throwing that word around. But Chase Brown last year, I mean, RB10, you were taking him, I mean, in the triple digit rounds, and he was practically free in a lot of drafts. Fantasy points per game last year, 15.9 was good enough for RB14, 11 total touchdowns, and he had 54 receptions. And, targets wise, number 6 in the NFL with 65. And keep in mind, that was him splitting targets with, Zach Moss around him. And his honestly, his targets went up, as the season progressed, and they used him more. I mean, there was a week in week 2 against KC where he saw 0 targets. And so he became more and more involved in that pass game, where at the end of the season, it was absolutely elite. From weeks 11 to 16, let's just call it weeks 9 to 17. He didn't have under 91 total yards, right? And he was heavily involved in the passing game, right? We saw him catch 5, 9, 5, 3, 6, 3, 3, all those receptions, and 4 at the end against Denver, in the championship. So Chase Brown, I'm not super surprised that that's, the reports coming out, so to speak. I think he can get up there a little bit more in terms of his targets and receptions, just because he started off a little bit slower due to Zach Moss being involved. But Chase Brown right now, I have him as my running back 8. He's currently in my tier 3. There are only 3 running backs in that tier for me. And if you do want all our tiers and rankings and all that insight, you can go over, to our Discord. I did share that already. We have the Patreon. We do have a free service in there if you want to join and hang out and talk to us. I'm sharing it again in the chat. But Chase Brown, I think, I have him over guys like Bucky Irving, Josh Jacobs, Kyren Williams, and he's on an offense that defense is going to be terrible again. I mean, just not good at all. And when we look at just some of the stats from last year on that defense, I mean, the defense in general was arguably the worst defense in football. I think that's pretty fair to say. I'm pulling up some of their stats, but the Bengals total yards per game given up 25th, right? Total touchdowns given up. They gave up 50 touchdowns, 50, right? And this offense is going to push opposing teams to have to play in high scoring games, right? So they ranked 3rd in total touchdowns last year. I expect that to continue. And then in terms of just EPA per pass, I mean, Joe Burrow was absolutely amazing, right? So we can expect him to continue that. And just overall, I expect the defense to be bad, them to be in really, really high scoring games, and Chase Brown is going to be used in the pass game consistently. And so I'm excited to see that. I like Chase Brown. I was a little skeptical with the Taj Brooks drafting. I think Taj Brooks is going to have a role. So I want that to be known that I do think Taj Brooks is going to have a role in this offense, but I don't think it's going to be a role that's going to, hinder Chase Brown a ton. I think he's going to get some early down work if that defense can be better. I think he's going to maybe get some red zone work as well. But overall, Chase Brown is going to be a very, very good pick, in my opinion, for fantasy this year. Closing Chase Brown out, let's take a look at his ADP right now. He's currently the running back 12, and he's going at pick 27. You're getting Chase Brown in the third round as the RB 12. I have him as my RB8. So I'm ahead on consensus a solid amount. And yeah, I mean, I think it's wheels up for Chase Brown this year. Shout out to my buddy Chev. We had a lot of discussions about Chase Brown, and you know I was not as high on Brown as he was, but I've come back, and I'm excited for Brown this year, who again finishes RB10 on the season in total points last year. Taking a look at some other things, some quick hitters, you know, with the 49ers, their running back room outside of Christian McCaffrey has taken some hits. And, you know, Isaac Guerendo has a shoulder injury, sidelining him for a few weeks. And Jordan James did return to 49ers camp and apparently looks really fast. So Jordan James could possibly be the handcuff in this room, right? That's going to be a premium handcuff as well. You know, is it going to be Jordan James? You know, is it going to be Isaac Guerendo? Which guy is going to be the better player to, you know, to have? And this is honestly probably going to be a situation where you're holding Isaac Guerendo. CMC maybe misses some time, right? And Isaac Guerendo ends up getting injured after a week or two. I wholeheartedly see that as a world of possibilities. And you're out here, you know, like picking up whatever running back is on the scrap heap that you may have a chance to have in that 49ers backfield, right? And so CMC, though, if you're drafting him this year, you know, he's a guy that you're going to need and going to want to handcuff. Jordan James and Isaac Guerendo are practically free. You know, Jordan James is going to be much cheaper. Jordan James is picked 331. He's RB6, 87 off the board. And then you have Isaac Guerendo, who, you know, is a little bit more expensive and goes at 147, pick 46. Isaac Guerendo goes ahead of guys like Nick Chubb, Rashal Tootin, Trey Benson, Jerome Ford, some other handcuffs, right? Ray Davis and Braylon Allen are behind Isaac Guerendo, and you know, Ray Davis and Braylon Allen have gotten steamed up in offseason talk. Braylon Allen looks like he's going to have a pretty solid role in that offense. I'm projecting it to be probably like a 65 to 35 split, with Braylon Allen getting a lot of goal line work in that offense. And then Ray Davis, of course, with the James Cook news. Ray Davis had 6 touchdowns last year and only like 28% of the snap share, and was pretty effective. So if you're looking at 2 guys in this room, and you're hoping that I'm going to go ahead and give you which guy is the player to own right now, I mean, I'm going to take the guy that's not injured currently, and Jordan James, right? And Jordan James was drafted by the 49ers in the 5th round this year. You know, he's 21 years old, really fast player, ran a 4.5 540, which is fine. You know, not the fastest 40-yard dash, but I don't care too much about 40-yard dashes for the running back position, but a good player in college, right? Had 233 rushing attempts, 1,267 total rushing yards, caught 26 passes as well. This is a guy that can catch passes out of the backfield, and 15 total touchdowns last year at Oregon, where Isaac Guerendo, you know, he's coming at a little bit more of a higher price. And if you are drafting, I would be drafting James. We'll see a little bit more as we get closer to the season, you know, which was heavily where people are going to be drafting more, you know, 2 weeks before the season starts. You know, hopefully Guerendo is back by then. But with the 49ers, we can really never really trust the injury reports with them. So we'll see. But Guerendo looked pretty healthy looked pretty good when he was on the field. 420 rushing yards, 5 yards per carry, 15 receptions, 152 receiving yards, and 4 total touchdowns in 16 total games last year. Obviously, Jordan Mason was the main guy there, you know, when CMC missed some time. But that's going to do it for that running back room. Let's go ahead and move on here, you know, to some more news and notes. Dennis is in the chat. He said, what's going on, guys? You amazing and beautiful people. What's up, Dennis? Thanks for hopping in. If you guys aren't already subscribed or haven't at least liked the show, please do so. It would help us out tremendously. Helps keep the lights on, because more followers, more viewers, more listeners, you know, is going to help us out tremendously. So appreciate your support. Nick Chubb reportedly had the best day of camp so far. This this running back room is absolutely atrocious right now. It's really not one that I'm heavily investing in. If I was going to take a running back in this room, it's definitely not Nick Chubb. So I just, I struggle with the Nick Chubb news, and bear with me here because I want to grab the entire Texans depth chart so far just to get a full read of who's in this room. But overall, I mean, the running back room outside of Joe Mixon, you have Dameon Pierce, you have Woody Marks, who, was drafted 4th round this year. The team traded up to get him. You have Jawar Jordan, JJ Taylor, Daire Ungumbawale, and Dameon Pierce, who came off, I think he just came off the injury report. I'd have to check that out. I just think Joe Mixon's super concerning. I did put a video out, recently a couple weeks ago, and Joe Mixon was one of my top 5 running backs that I'm fading at their ADP. I'm reading the tea leaves, a lot of red flags with him this offseason, and so far that's looking correct. I'm not going to pat myself on the back too much, but his ADP has dropped significantly, since that news has come out. But I think Jordan James is the guy that I would prefer in this room if I was going to take anybody. I don't know how much value Nick Chubb is going to have. He could be solid. And, right now, Nick Chubb is pick 148, RB 47 off the board, right? I think, if you're in a tough spot with your running back room and you just need bodies for the first few weeks because maybe you drafted a lot of young running backs that are rookies and you're hoping for, them to, maybe carve out a role later on into the season, Nick Chubb might just be a safe play in managed leagues because, he's likely going to be the number 1 back, in my opinion, to start for the first few weeks while Joe Mixon's out, which I expect Joe Mixon to miss the first few weeks. So that's a situation where I would take Nick Chubb if your running back room is not super strong, and you start getting to where Nick Chubb's drafted. It's Guerendo, who is not going to be a starter unless there's injury, and it's just a bunch of handcuffs outside of that, right? Maybe Jerome Ford is the starter if this whole situation with Quinshon Judkins doesn't get sorted out. But that's a world where I would draft Nick Chubb. I think it's a fine cost. But if I'm in a situation where my running back room is really good, I'm going to be looking at those premium handcuffs because I don't need or expect a ton out of them unless there's an injury, but I don't need them to start on my roster either. So, that would be a situation where, taking a guy like Nick Chubb would not be something I would advocate for. But moving on to some more news and notes, Shedeur Sanders, right? We have him as the thumbnail. We're going to talk about him. Shedeur Sanders right now, they have him allegedly he's going to be taking the first team reps, in this joint practice, I believe today. And so it's going to be a big test for Shedeur Sanders to see, I know a lot of people feel like he's not being set up for success. I've seen a lot of people complain about, him getting first team reps. The first time he's getting the reps is going to be in joint practice, and it's not setting him up for success. I think Shedeur Sanders would tell you to pound sand if you are making those claims, because I'm sure he's excited for the opportunity, right? This is a huge opportunity for Shedeur Sanders to go out there. Is it ideal circumstances that he hasn't been working with the first team? No, it's really not. But guess what? As a backup quarterback in season, you're going to be thrown into unideal circumstances, right? If you are, going to have to start or play, right? Mid-game coming in, right? Those aren't going to be ideal circumstances. So similar to that, right? Shedeur is going to get a chance to be thrown into the fire. And I hope he takes that opportunity, and I hope he does well, right? This is a quarterback room that has Joe Flacco, who I believe is going to start week 1, right? You have Kenny Pickett and Dylan Gabriel, who are right now injured, and they just brought in Tyrone Snoop Huntley, and they just signed him, which to me signals that they are concerned about Pickett not coming back super quickly. They have Joe Flacco, who's old, and Snoop Huntley might just be a guy that they just need. They right now they're down quarterbacks. They need more bodies, camp body, right? He could absolutely just be a camp body, which is very, very likely for Tyrone Snoop Huntley. But we'll see what happens with Shedeur Sanders. I'm not necessarily rooting against the guy. I hope and I hope he takes the opportunity in stride. And I think it's a good opportunity that, like I said before, while people are sitting here saying he's not being set up for success, okay, would you rather him just start Snoop Huntley in joint practices this week because he's a veteran and is more polished, and instead of throwing Shedeur out into the fire? Like, Shedeur is a pro. He's been in tough situations in college in his entire career. This is a good opportunity. Even if he doesn't flourish or succeed, he's going to make the best of it, I hope. And it's going to be a learning experience, even if he doesn't, right? It's a good experience overall. And so that's really all I'll say on Shedeur. Justin Fields has struggled in camp mightily so far. Justin Fields, we've said it time and time again, from a fantasy perspective, if he is starting, he's going to give you, top 10 upside at the quarterback position any week that he starts. And I think that's a fair thing to say. Justin Fields, the quarterback, though, I have concerns and hesitations, right? Justin Fields has struggled mightily in camp so far. I don't put too much stock into training camp interceptions and, all those things. But the reports, it's not even just the interceptions. It's the sloppiness for the offense, right? There were reports that came out that, like, the first play of practice the other day, they have only 10 guys on the field, right? They're pre-snap penalties already in camp. It seems extremely messy. And, it's just, I don't think this coaching staff, right, with Aaron Glenn, is going to put up with, sloppiness and ineffectiveness at the quarterback position. And I think they could have a pretty quick leash if things get messy, because they have a very capable quarterback in Tyrod Taylor. And so, it's going to be interesting. I do have a little bit of concerns there, though. I will say Garrett Wilson has been able to play well, with bad quarterback play. And so, thankfully they have a capable quarterback in Tyrod Taylor. As a backup, if Fields struggles, Taylor did sign a 2-year contract, and he's getting about $8.5 million guaranteed at signing. So, is there some concern for maybe other players? I can understand it. And I get it for, people that are maybe hesitant with this Jets offense. I have Justin Fields currently in my quarterback rankings for fantasy. I have him as my quarterback 12. Right ahead of Brock Purdy. If I'm drafting Justin Fields in fantasy, folks, you're drafting a second quarterback. Generally speaking, I don't like to draft a second quarterback if I can avoid it, especially if it's a 1 quarterback league, and I draft a quarterback high. But with all the quarterback value, right, that's there later on, Fields pairing him up with a guy like a Justin Herbert, right, who goes later, CJ Stroud, Jordan Love, right? Like, go and look at quarterbacks that are in stable, good offenses, and target them as your quarterback 2 behind Justin Fields. That would be my recommendation. Breece Hall, I think, is going to be really good. When we look at some of the guys and the weapons in this offense for the Jets, I know people have some concerns about Breece Hall, right? And will he get vultured? I think Breece Hall is going to be just fine. He's going at a really, really good price right now, in my opinion. He's running back 14, pick 32 off the board. So you're getting him in the mid-second round to even late second round in a lot of drafts. And right now I have Breece Hall as my RB14. So I have him right at consensus. I'm not too high. I'm not too low. I recognize that there are some concerns in this offense, and I wouldn't blame anybody for being hesitant drafting Breece. And then Garrett Wilson on the flip side, right now I have Garrett Wilson as my wide receiver 12. He's in my tier 3. He's behind Ladd McConkey. He's ahead of JSN. I have Ladd as my wide receiver 10. I have Garrett as my wide receiver. I'm sorry, I have Ladd as my wide receiver 11. I have Garrett as my wide receiver 12, and I have AJ Brown as my wide receiver 10. So, we'll see what happens with this offense. But as I said, Aaron Glenn, I don't think is going to, put up with it. And thankfully, Tyrod Taylor is a very, very capable quarterback. If things go bad in that offense, or if things are not, percolating the way we had hoped early on. Paul said, is Jarquez Hunter a backup, or does he have standalone value? He does not have standalone value. Unless there's an injury to Kyren Williams. They just made a very strong commitment, to Kyren Williams, that, they're guaranteeing $23 million over the next 3 years. It's a pretty strong commitment. They're going to, utilize that and play the player that, they just spent a ton of money on with Jarquez Hunter. And so, with Kyren Williams. And so, I think Jarquez could have a solid season, overall with, maybe being a little bit of a change of pace every so often, giving them a boost. Maybe he plays in the receiving game a little bit more, and eats into some of that workload for Kyren. But Kyren's been a solid receiver too. But maybe Jarquez, if he can handle pass pro, can maybe be an explosive player in the 2-minute offense for them, if that offensive line is capable and holding up, where, there's not too much concern, where, they need somebody who's a really, really strong pass blocker, or running back that's good in pass pro. Spencer Rattler taking all the first team reps in Saints camp the last 2 days. It's apparently the first time that's happened in this quote unquote quarterback competition. In terms of back-to-back days where one of the quarterbacks is getting, first team reps. Now, I think it's malpractice to me to not start Tyler Shough. Whether he's good or bad, you spent the draft capital on the guy. He's not a spring chicken. He's older, right? This is a quarterback where, he's 25.8 years old. He's going to turn 26 at the end of this year. Got to start the guy, right? You have to start Tyler Shough. I don't see a world where you don't. And you know what? You live with it, right? You took this guy at the 208 in the NFL draft this year, right? Second round pick, high second round pick, right? You got to go and start him. I just don't see a world where you're rolling out Spencer Rattler, right? Unless you're sitting here and saying Shough is coming along, but Rattler's been phenomenal. We have plans to maybe move on from Rattler, or maybe it's just like, hey, none of these quarterbacks are ready. We don't want to get Tyler Shough punch drunk, and so let's give Shough an extra few weeks to kind of prep, see how the process is for prepping and game planning for teams. Then maybe there's a world there where I understand it if all the quarterbacks are bad and you're trying to give him a few weeks so he doesn't just get, thrown into the fire, I guess, so to speak. But overall, I just don't see a world where Spencer Rattler should be starting, unless Rattler has just been lights out, and I haven't really heard that. So I think that's a mistake, on the Saints' part. But, a lot of people will sit here and say that Tyler Shough was a mistake to be drafted in the first place. I think he did go a little bit higher than expected. I liked him coming out of college. I know Coach liked him coming out of college. But I think it should be Shough's job to lose. And I think they should probably stop playing all these games of, rotating 3 quarterbacks every single day. It's a disaster. Jake Haener should not be getting any reps at first team at all. If you want to go Spencer Rattler and Shough, okay, but give them the first team reps majority, and let's move on here. So we talked about Matt Stafford. We talked about the quarterbacks here. Let's go over to the tight ends, and then we'll close out today's show. I do want to remind people, the Discord link is attached. If you guys want to go ahead and jump into our free Discord, we also do provide some premium services as well, if you do want to get in on those. We also have the Patreon link as well. Now, let's move over to Mason Taylor. High ankle sprain, misses second straight day. probably going to be out for a few weeks. When you hear high ankle sprain, it's not something that, these guys typically get rushed back from. He's a young player. I don't think they're going to rush him back from a high ankle sprain. Those are always the tougher ones to get over, especially in sports, right? I mean, the high ankle sprain, if it was a low ankle sprain, it'd be a little bit different, but the high ankle sprain is just tough. And, I think that's something to monitor. I don't expect him to be back at practice, and I could very well see him missing week 1 just due to it being a high ankle sprain and those just taking a little bit longer to come back from. Paul said, if Stafford misses time, what players' production increases or decreases? I'm more concerned about Puka than I am Devontae Adams, just because Puka's price point's very high. We talked about that a little bit at the top of the show. Paul, if you want to go to the archives, if you go to the 8-minute mark, it's when we started talking about Matt Stafford and that offense. But just in summary, Puka's price point is much more expensive. I'm okay with Jimmy G in this offense. I'm sitting here saying that the Rams are going to win a bunch of games under Jimmy G, not necessarily, but I think he can operate that offense. Maybe not at a high level, but a good enough level to keep some of these fantasy assets afloat. But there is some cause for concern right now when you start hearing back injury for a quarterback that's consistently had injuries with his back and is 37 years old. But let's move on to the next guy we're going to talk about at the tight end position. It's going to be Elijah Arroyo. Elijah Arroyo is one of Coach's favorite prospects coming out of Miami, the tight end position. He goes to Seattle, and Elijah Arroyo, the reports have been glowing right now for Elijah Arroyo. He's apparently just been lighting up practice. He's somebody to monitor, at the tight end position. He could be in deep leagues, a nice stash at the tight end position. And like I said, it's just been pretty glowing for him so far. And I'm with Noah Fant's release, outside of AJ Barner, who AJ Barner probably gets more of the inline blocking work and probably gets the first shot and opportunity. I think he could be a pretty good weapon in fantasy at the tight end position. I'm excited for Arroyo. I think it's good news for him. Not going to spend too much time on him today. But the last 2 nuggets here, apparently Darren Waller is on track to be ready for week 1. We'll see what happens here. He comes into the Dolphins offense who really doesn't have a tight end outside of him right now. And so we'll see, but he's had issues staying healthy even before he retired. And so that's a little bit of a quote unquote concern, I guess, but I don't really care too much about Darren Waller. I won't be rostering him unless, he starts to pick up momentum mid-season. And if I miss out on Darren Waller, I'm not going to sit here and be too upset about it. Moving on to the last player that I want to talk about today. It's going to be Tucker Kraft. And Tucker Kraft is a player I was very, very high on, or I've been high on this offseason. I'm really excited for his involvement in this offense. I think he can take his steps forward. He's finally back. I know he kind of missed a little bit of time, a few days due to I think it was a groin injury, but I could be completely wrong about that. And if so, no big deal. But he is back, which is encouraging. And reports seem to be pretty glowing about him so far in camp with Tucker Kraft. It kind of tracks well with what we heard Jordan Love say, which was that he wants to get Tucker Kraft the ball. And Tucker Kraft could be the pass catcher to own in this offense. I think Matthew Golden is going to probably be the best player in this offense this year from the receiving position. But Tucker Kraft could absolutely be the best guy for fantasy based on his cost and where he finishes. When you look at Tucker Kraft and his total ADP at the tight end position right now, Tucker Kraft is going as tight end 13, pick 112 behind Jonnu Smith. I'll take Tucker Kraft over Jonnu Smith. He's going behind Colson Loveland. There is a little bit more steam up with Loveland lately, but I'm still going to take Tucker Kraft over Loveland. And then Tyler Warren and Njoku I would take ahead of him, as well as Evan Ingram and Mark Andrews, who are also going ahead of him, and I take those guys as well. But I think Tucker Kraft is set up for a pretty solid season this year. I'm excited for it. But that's going to do it for me, guys. Appreciate you guys watching. If you haven't already, like and subscribe. The Mediators are going to go live tonight, like they've done every single Wednesday. I believe tonight they're doing a redraft, which should be fun. They're going to do a mock draft if you want to get in there. It's going to be posted in our Discord. So those guys are going to get first come, first serve. And we hope to see you guys here tonight.
Welcome to the FF Face-Off, where fantasy football is